Welcome to Off the Post. I'm Russ Cohen. We've got Anthony Mangione. Ant, how are you?
It's a gloomy day here in Philly, but the amount of news that's coming through is like nuclear sun level right now.
Philly, Vancouver, a lot of news everywhere. Michael Jello, we have you. Do we have your attention?
Yes, you do, and I could care less about Philly and Vancouver. It's Game 5, Toronto, Florida.
Yeah, in sunny Toronto. And we have Patrick Johnston from the province and Vancouver Sun. Patrick, how are you?
I'm good now. It was a busy morning with not just Tocchet, but Adam Foote and Tom Lander finally signing, and it's.
We'll try and get to all of it. But I'm going to still start with their biggest problem, Elias Pettersson.
God!
I'm sure you're sick of writing about him. He just had a miserable season considering the talent he has. We heard all of the JT Miller, Pettersson stuff, but now it's just him. And we saw what Rick Tocchet had said to him in case he was coming back to be the coach, and it wasn't complimentary. What's your take on all this?
Well, it's interesting. You're not the first person from afar to say, "Hey, I heard he ripped him," which I mean, he was trying not to, but yeah, I mean, Elias Pettersson's main issue this season was he wasn't strong enough and he wasn't fit enough, and perhaps that's been a long time coming. He came into the league, obviously won the Calder, was an outstanding rookie, had a pretty good sophomore season, struggled during the COVID season, came back and had an outstanding season. I mean, even in the midst of some struggles with the overall team, 21-22, but the whole course of his career has been nothing but positive until about 18 months ago, or less than even. You go back to the All-Star game last season, 2024, he was one of the stars of the month for the NHL in January 2024, and all of a sudden fell apart. Yeah. And he hasn't been able to find his way back to the guy that he has been. And a lot of that comes back to, I think teams have figured out he doesn't do well when you're right on top of him. He's perhaps lacking in leg strength to pull away from guys to operate in the way that he's succeeded in the past. And that's what Rick Tocchet talked about. He said this guy needs to prepare better. He needs to find a way to be more ready for the season. And we heard a little bit from GM Patrick Allvin last week speaking to season ticket holders, talking about basically JT Miller came in, I think quite literally in the best shape of his life. He struggled a bit with an injury in preseason, but he came in saying, okay, I got the message. We did really well last year, but this year's going to be even harder. And clearly the implication was that this message was not heard or not certainly understood by Pettersson in any effective way. And so now the challenge is, can he do that going forward? He's a guy that marches to his own beat. There is little doubt that he is a very, very much the definition of a lone wolf, and has struggled, I think, with feedback, whether that's reporters trying to talk to him off the record and find out what's going on, or I guess even his coaches trying to help him find his way to the player he needs to be. So yeah, I mean, it was a miserable, awful season. His first season of him making $11.6 million in the season, one of the top paid players in the league, didn't play like one, and the Canucks need him to be, and there's just no other way to say it.
Patrick, let me just add on to the Pettersson talk here, because we heard all the trade rumors before the Miller deal.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was focused on is, well, his no move clause doesn't kick in until July 1st. Yeah. So is that over with now that they've traded Miller? Is that over with, or because he played so badly this year? I mean, he's a great player, a great talent.
Yeah.
He didn't live up to his expectations. Is that over with, or is it still a possibility he gets moved?
It's not impossible. It's not a zero chance that he gets moved. I still think it's highly unlikely, but certainly it's something we know they explored. I mean, even after the Miller trade, I think there were some conversations about moving him. There was the contemplation of, do we go full on, blow it all up, start again? There is no trade or no move restriction on his contract because he is still only 26. You can't have it until it's your age 27 year, which is this year. So yeah, you're correct. He does not have, like, the Canucks could trade him anywhere they want. until July.
Anybody
1st.
who wants to pay that salary and those.
Well, that's it. Anyone who wants to make the bet. And we know, for instance, that the Carolina Hurricanes have kicked tires on this. Like they look at the player and they say, wow, that talent is there. We think I think he would fit their system really well.
And unlike Mikko Rantanen, he can't say I'm not.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly, and he is going to be there. I mean, he got told that was an option going back a year ago, and it is allegedly one of the reasons why he kind of went, I guess I should sign on here, because last season at the deadline, basically they were saying, well, what are we going to do? Or going into the deadline, what are we going to do? Elias, if you don't want to be here, we're going to have to move on. And just so you know, one of the teams interested is Carolina. And I don't think he wanted to move there. So here we are.
Well, I'll just before Anthony asks his first question, I do know, covering Buffalo for the Hockey News, there were a lot of rumors about Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram. Yeah. And now it's starting to sound as if Bowen Byram is going to get traded this summer because he doesn't want to be a number 3 behind Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. And he's a restricted free agent, and he hired Darren Ferris. So Darren Ferris could say, "Oh, I'll sign a 2-year deal and walk the free agency."
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of warning signs there. I don't know if that means that the Sabres are still in on Pettersson, but I know that they were at one point. Yeah,
and listen, we'd heard some of that noise too, and certainly a player, I think that rightly so. The coach, the management team should be interested in a defenseman like Bowen Byram. It's a more difficult fit now because if you're moving him, obviously that changes the dynamic. The Canucks are going to have some cap space. They have to re-sign it, do a couple signings. Now they've got Willander under contract. They have a better sense of what their defense core is going to be. But they look like they're moving on from Brock Besser. They're going to need to find another scoring winger. They would like to find another center. They have to make a decision with Pius Suter. Pius Suter had a great season, but he's going to be a $5 million player now. And do they think that he's a $5 million player for the next few seasons? Or does Suter and his agent think, well, we can, even if the Canucks make a good offer, can we get more out there? There's a good chance of that. They need to find a center. They need to find a winger. And those are the priorities. Trading Pettersson, even as interesting a player as Byram would be for this line, just for the record, Byram would then be the number 3 defenseman here. So if he doesn't want to be number 3 in Buffalo, coming to Vancouver is probably not going to be all that appetizing.
Well, it could be number 2 or number 1 in a couple of years.
Well, yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So that, if you're planning for the future, certainly the idea of, wow, I'm sure we'll come to this when we talk about Rick Tocchet, but one of the sort of notions of why Tocchet left was I don't think was convinced that Quinn Hughes is going to stay. Right. I think this is deep, a really, and most people are taking it as such, a very worrying message about the future of the roster here. And Hughes could be an unrestricted free agent in 2 seasons. And obviously his brothers play in New Jersey. Even Jim Rutherford talked about it. People are kind of taken aback, but I was like, no, that's what Jim does. He talks in truth. And he said, listen, I have every reason to think he wants to play with his brothers, and they play in New Jersey. So, trading for 2 players versus 1 player just walking free agency, you can figure out which is easier.
Yeah.
So, you're exactly right. Bo Byram, you could be. Yeah, I suppose you could be. So if the Canucks were to go aggressive and trade Hughes and trade Pettersson and just start afresh, that's a universe that could happen. I don't think they're going to do that because in the end, the ownership here loves the idea of chasing for the playoffs. As bad as that has gone over the past decade, that is their constant, never-ending obsession that they can play a few playoff games and that will solve all their problems. And management, no matter who it's been, whether it's been Trevor Linden or Jim Benning or now Jim Rutherford and Patrick Elvine, have gone along with that.
Patrick, obviously, you've had a front row seat for the last few seasons of the Rick Tocchet show in Vancouver. So there's a lot of back and forth here in Philadelphia about, and a legitimate question. A lot of people, look at Tocchet and wonder just how good he is as a head coach. He had obviously last year was a pretty remarkable, was a really, really well done run. But, things really kind of fell apart this year. So the question is, in your mind, who is Rick Tocchet as a head coach? And is when you look at him and project what he does with the roster that Philadelphia has, How do you see this potentially playing out?
Well, I can tell you that he's going to talk about one thing for sure. He's going to talk about centers. Because one of the real failures this season obviously was Pettersson, but even Miller put up some points, but Miller did not have a good year in Vancouver before he was traded. And there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it was tied into this conflict he had with Pettersson, but he just didn't play very well. I think there were also some other things going on. I mean, he took this leave that we're still not quite sure what.
I remember that.
But you know, there were, I think, personal. He just wasn't playing that well, and he was struggling with a lot of stuff. And you know, the two centers, if your centers aren't playing well, if they're not cutting through the middle, if they're not attacking the middle of the ice, which is what Tocchet wants them to do, it's not going to go well. We saw how well it went last year. Obviously, they got a fair bit of puck luck, but they also just created really good scoring chances and had a bunch of good finishers. They were an outstanding offensive team for much of last season, and then they hit the wall a little bit, a lot of it because of Pettersson's struggles. And yet they still pushed the Edmonton Oilers to the Game 7 of the second round. So Tocchet will, I guarantee you, talk a lot about his center. So, you know, what is center ice going to look like in Philly next season? That's something for you guys to contemplate. Look very, very closely. Right? Like, he's going to love a guy like Travis Sanheim. I know that for sure. He's going to love a guy like Travis Konecny. I think he will look at Michkov and wonder if there's, you know, how much more details can this guy add to his game? Because that certainly is something that he is very, 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 very focused on. You know, he's, I think, like a guy like Jamie Drysdale, like, who certainly we saw a fair bit out here before, you know, and a guy that knows how to play. Like, he looks for guys that do things, make smart plays. He looks for guys that take bets, but he wants them to be in the right part of the ice. He is a bit of, I think, a bit of an sort of instinctually conservative coach, in that it's not that he doesn't want his players to play risks, but he wants them to build a good base, build a good foundation. And, you know, this team did not skate well enough. And I think he will acknowledge, if you ask him about what happened with his defense core this year, is that they got it wrong. They thought they could turn Vinny Desharnais into something more than he was, which was not a very good defenseman. Thought
Rutherford did not give him the best roster.
Well, I think it was a combined. It's a combined. Honestly, like, some of the, you know, it was a very collaborative effort here. I mean, obviously, in the end, it's on the president and GM, Patrick Alvin, to assemble the roster. But he has thoughts on who he likes and who he'd want to bring in. And so there were some misfires, certainly. You know, up front, they had some misfires. Danton Heinen was too dull of a player. You know, they also got some great performance. I mean, Pius Suter was a fantastic player for Rick Tocchet and did everything Rick Tocchet wanted him to do. He does, you know, the other thing I think is funny. I mean, you guys know this like firsthand. Rick Tocchet, the player, is not Rick Tocchet, the coach. Right. The guy that was, you know, like the you know, one of the toughest guys in the NHL in the 1980s. He is a very smart, very calculated, very conscious of what he does and how he acts.
Yeah, he wouldn't like Rick Tocchet, the player, because he used to go off the chain at times.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, but also it was a time and a place, right?
Yeah.
You know, so you know, there were moments certainly when, you know, we knew that he wishes maybe one of his guys would just go after so and so, but he also knew that's just not how the game is anymore. So he would never lament it. You knew inside, you could just see the gears turning every once. But really, this is a guy that recognizes where the game is at, how it's played, and he also recognizes how much he doesn't know. Which, you know, I was going back through the you know, Adam Foote hiring. I was going back through a story I wrote about him last season, midway through last season, because Foote basically, as far as being like a bench coach, if you will, had very little experience. He'd been a development coach for the Avalanche. He coached like elite, like rep hockey in Colorado, his son's teams basically. And then he had this pretty mediocre 15 months coaching the Kelowna Rockets in junior, right before the pandemic, and got fired. I mean, he was coaching the team that was hosting Memorial Cup. To be fired from a team that's coaching or hosting Memorial Cup is like unprecedented. Yeah. But that's how poorly things were going. And yet, Quinn Hughes now says he's the best coach he's ever had. So he's this guy that had this incredible transformation. I think Rick Tocchet was the perfect person for him as sort of a mentor in terms of how to prepare, how to have a practice plan, how to have everything ready. Because this is something, I mean, I asked him, this was December 2023 when I wrote this story, and I asked Rick, and I said, how much has Adam Foote improved as a coach? He said about 1,000,000%, and that was in like 9 months, 10 months, right?
Okay.
So there's an understanding from him of how things work, how your personnel, what your coaches can do, what's possible, but also what you don't know. And a guy that, when the mics would go down, was always happy to chat with the reporters and answer our questions about what they were trying to do, but also at the same time, curious about maybe things that we were thinking of or we knew about, and, looking to other sports. And he's a really certainly an interesting person, and he's had some success as a coach. I think reasonably so, was the Jack Adams winner last year.
Mm-hmm.
But the track record is a guy
playoffs, 9 years. It's
his track record is defense is where everything starts, and then he likes to think that his system should score more goals than it did. Certainly, I think that's what he would have said about this year.
Patrick, do you think it's possible as well, since centers is such an area that he focuses in on? We've talked about Philadelphia being potentially involved in either, if they're not involved in offer sheets, then the threat of potential offer sheets.
Sure.
Do you think basically one of the ways that the Flyers entice Tocchet to come in beyond the dollar figures is some level of aggression this offseason in getting pivots because the Flyers center depth right now, obviously
terrible.
Not great. It's terrible. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Certainly he would look for a plan. I mean, there's two things I think that he would want to be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, stability, right? Mm-hmm. So he's going to look at Keith Jones and say, Keith Jones is here for a while. Yeah. So I'm signing on. You look at the opposition of that, Vancouver, he looks at Jim Rutherford, someone he had a lot of time for, had a great relationship with, but we don't know if Jim's going to be here in a year. And it's not just because whether Jim has job security, it's things like those who don't know, Jim Rutherford has a second family. So he has a son who's in his last year of high school. He's going into his last year of high school here in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So, he's done a year from now. Does Jim want to stay just for family reasons? He doesn't need to be here for family reasons. So he doesn't know where he's going to go. So if Jim's gone, what's Patrick Allvin? How loyal is ownership to, that was clearly one of the things that you just sort of poke around the edges, that was something that he was thinking about. I think there was some appeal, like Seattle made him an offer, and Jason Botterill just got the job. He knows Jason Botterill quite well from Pittsburgh, right? There was some stability there. But here we are. You look at this is the team that everyone kind of said, well, there's an obvious fit, not just from a playing standpoint, but for the historic reasons. Mm-hmm. He would have looked at seeing what the stability is like here, but then second, he would have looked at what's the plan. How is this team going to become better, and how sort of devoted is ownership to a thing like, well, we hope to hit some home runs, finding a couple centers, but if we don't hit them, we're going to be okay. We have a plan B, and ownership's fine with that. They're not expecting just an immediate change in fortune. Yeah. And I think that's surely what he's looked for, and I think we can see that's where things are at right now.
Patrick, my last one for you. You talked about Tom Willander. My heart skipped a beat when you were already kind of putting him in the lineup. I don't know if they will or not. I wouldn't do it. I think he still has more growth to do, especially offensively, if you want to get more offense out of him. But what do you think Vancouver is going to do with him?
Well, it's an interesting one, because obviously most of us thought that he would have signed after BU obviously made the Frozen Four. So the idea of playing at the end of the season was almost a moot point anyway, but it dragged on in a way that was a little bit concerning for a moment, because these things they're not that complicated. But, now he's signed on to a 3-year ELC. They've structured the performance bonuses in such a way that he's actually going to make potentially more money this way than he would have had he signed his ELC right at the end of the season and burned that first year. But I think more than anything is actually what you just hit on, is what is the plan here? Like, I'm not even sure he and his agent want to go in, say, I'm an NHL right off the bat. I think there's sort of a belief that this is something that can play, that there's sort of a course forward involving maybe some AHL time. You look at how the bonuses, his performance bonuses are structured. It's actually, this year's only $500. He only can be eligible up to, I think, $500,000. There's $1.9 million in play for years 2 and 3. right? So there's a recognition here that he may not hit his targets this year.
That's probably better for him.
Which is fair enough, right? Like, they're just sort of, there's a recognition from the player himself that, you know what, like, I'm not going to be anxious about getting the lineup to hit my bonuses for this season.
No, that's good. I actually think that's a good structure.
Yeah.
Good
yeah.
job.
And I think it was probably a statement from him, like from, basically in the end, they looked at the number. It's, it's 2.4 million between the 3 seasons, average 800,000 in bonuses per season. Like, that's a set number. You come into it, well, I'd like to have 800, blah, blah, blah. But basically, you went and said, well, hey, Canucks, I think I can hit this and this. How do you guys feel about that? And in the end, they obviously agreed to it. As someone said to me clearly, it was a meeting of minds here.
Patrick, last one for me. I want to get a sort of read on the Canucks goaltending situation next season. We know that Kevin Lankinen, because of the injuries to Thatcher Demko, basically took over as the number one. Played over 50 games. Actually had a really good year and he earned a 3-year extension. Demko's got a year left at $5 million. Yeah. They also have Svilovs, who played well in the playoffs last year and well down in Abbotsford right now. Where do you think this is going? Do you think it's a Demko trade? Do you think a buyout? I mean, what do you think?
No, I don't think it'll be a buyout. I mean, he's only got one year to go on his current deal, which when he signed it, seemed a reasonable bet, $5 million per. Mm-hmm. And if he's healthy, it's a great contract given what goalies make in the league. But there's certainly concern about his health, right? And it's 3 years in a row he's had a substantial injury of some kind or another. He plays a demanding position. He plays it in a very hard way. Certainly, I know there's been concern from Jim Rutherford, who obviously the old goalie, now a goalie from a different era, but the old goalie who looked at how Demko was basically practicing and saying, this guy's pushing himself too hard. I think we need to have a serious chat about sustainability here. Now, it may just be that here's a guy who's in his late 20s now. I mean, he's 20. What year? He's 28. He's hitting the wall a little bit physically. There just might be no getting around that. He nonetheless is a guy they need to come back and perform. And certainly, at least for this year anyway, I think he said he would like to sign a contract extension. Now, Rick Tocchet not being back makes me wonder if that equation has changed at all. But he also knows Adam Foote, and Adam Foote is, I think, a known quantity to these players. I don't think Demko's going anywhere. Lankinen worked out great. He was signed at the end of training camp in a bit of an emergency situation. The Canucks really held firm in what they were willing to offer him, despite their own sort of ongoing crisis, not knowing when Demko was actually going to be ready to play. And Lankinen came in and he did the job. And he was, especially in the first half, really kind of felt like he kind of held the house up. And he started to struggle. I mean, you could see why he's never going to be a number one goalie in the NHL. Right. He started to hit the wall when he would play multiple starts in a row. And by the end of the year, he was a bit more of a league average goalie. So the contract they signed him to, especially in comparison to say like Charlie Lindgren, because I think most people thought Lindgren would be a good comp. He's making more than Charlie Lindgren. So was that the right decision? We'll see. But they also, I mean, you mentioned Shilovs. To be perfectly honest, this place has been a goalie factory over the years. Right now is not really looking like that. I mean, Ian Clark was kind of shoved aside, who'd been running the goalie department. And, Nikita Tolopilo got a game towards the end of the season, and he's an interesting enough prospect, but there's no reason to think that he is the next one. I think he certainly has leaped Shilov. Shilov's, you're right, had a great playoff, wonderful story, but he really struggled this season in the NHL. And
he'll be a Leafs goalie down the line.
Exactly, yeah. To the point where, like, honestly, like he was up, he was sort of around, but they really hesitant to start him by the end of the year when they had him as an option. There was real hesitation to put him in net. So, yeah, it's Demko and Lankinen for next year for sure. Maybe Tolopilo. They got this kid Ty Young, who's an interesting prospect, but there's not an obvious next one right now.
Patrick, thanks so much for coming on, especially with the kind of day you had, as busy as you were, giving us all this information. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
My
so
pleasure,
much.
guys. Yeah, take care.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
All right. So
All right.
we're going to skim over the other series because we know which one we're going to end up talking about the most.
Yep.
I think we have enough Rick Tocchet info here that I feel good moving on.
I think as we move along here, I think we're good.
Okay.
We can get into the series.
I don't have much to say about Hurricanes Capitals. Like if the Hurricanes close it out, so
Nobody does.
I'm not gonna lose any sleep.
I mean, listen, you gotta give the Hurricanes a lot of credit. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
did not think they were going to win this series, and I think they've just handled the Caps at 5-on-5. They just have, and that's where things kind of got hung up here for Washington. Is they just Carolina played more, especially once they got, because we said game 2 in our last show, like Caps picked up the physicality.
Yeah,
and then it kind of fell off again, and it's just they feel like, and our colleague Ted Starkey,
right.
I think our colleague Ted Starkey said it pretty well best. It's like they feel like a race car that's just running out of road, basically.
Yeah.
Spencer Carberry is going to win the Jack Adams, but he's getting outcoached by Rod Brindamore. And in the three games that Carolina has won, they've forced the Capitals to play Hurricanes hockey, to play the way that they want them to play. Yeah. And I don't think the Capitals can do that. It's boring. It's, not 95 Devils boring, but it's defensively structured, and Washington can't generate any offense when they're playing that way. And if Carolina gets up in these games, which they have been able to, they got no answer. So,
yeah, I mean, Washington has to get a lead next game or they're cooked. That's what I would say.
And I think Carolina's got a bit of a chip on their shoulder because of the rep they have, because of what happened with Rantanen and how they got kind of lambasted for that. We can't forget they got a really good player out of that deal in Logan Stankoven. So
no, he's good.
It's not like they didn't get anything out of that deal. He's been very good for them.
He's been really good. All right, so we'll talk briefly about the Oilers Knights. I think the Golden Knights. I think Vegas is dead. I do. I told you I thought they looked slow on defense.
They need it. They need to get coming back.
Way. You can say whatever you want about him, Mike, but he's been a massive addition, and I just don't see Vegas coming back from this.
One thing, Stuart Skinner.
He was fine last game.
I know, but I don't
listen. I don't like the guy.
For this series, he's going to be.
He
made one big mistake in Game 3.
He did.
But it was, again, it wasn't a series breaker for them. Edmonton came right back and played, played tight in front of them.
He went far last year, like he just did. Like, what are we going to do?
Of the 3 teams that are down 3-1, I have Vegas being the one that has the best chance to come back and win.
I wouldn't bet on that, Mike.
I'm not betting on it. I'm just saying I believe that because Pickard's not coming back. It doesn't sound like he's going to be back.
He's got a groin, so he probably isn't back this series. But if they move on, he could come back.
You could be in a worse situation.
Yeah, there's definitely
not having Stuart Skinner as your optional as your second option.
It could be Matt Murray. I get it.
Okay.
All right. So next we'll talk about Jet Stars. Now, look, Hellebuck played fine. If you didn't like one of the goals, okay, but he played fine. It wasn't him. I give Hellebuck credit because he spoke about it after the game, trying to exercise the demons, and that's what you have to do sometimes. I don't think they're dead yet, but I
feel like they're pretty worn. In many ways, they're a lot like Washington, and
they're not dead yet. That's the way.
This is a series where I feel like that first round series took a lot out of them.
It may have.
They got taken to the absolute limit by St. Louis, and that's what scared me about. I mean, it was great to see. I mean, it's a great moment for Winnipeg. That overtime. That late goal in the overtime winner, obviously, against St. Louis in Game 7. But I was really worried because Dallas just seems like they're a freight train right now. They really, really do. And I did not like the matchups in this series for Winnipeg. And the minute Dallas got up early in the series, I'm like, it's almost akin to Russ, kind of like last year in the baseball playoffs when the Mets got up 1-0 and you're like, nah, against the Phillies. You're like, no, it's not over yet. And I said, no, I know when a team's in deep trouble, even after losing game 1. And I knew Winnipeg. I did not like the look in Game 1 of Winnipeg. And going to Dallas, Winnipeg, Dallas did what they needed to do and took care of home ice. And I don't like Winnipeg. I mean, they could take a game out of this. Maybe they take 2. Then in that case, you become worried about Dallas. But I'm pretty confident here we're going to see a Western final of Dallas versus Edmonton here.
I think there's a very good chance.
I mean, 0-5 on the road is an absolute killer. I mean,
it is.
But you have to say this. It's like Dallas is getting stronger as the playoffs go along. You know, Robertson comes back. Now Heiskanen comes back. You know, in the last game, they played 7 defensemen because they didn't want to push him. They only played him 14 minutes. So now I don't know if he's going to get back to where, classic Miro Heiskanen, but they get 80% of him since he's such a great.
Yeah, that would be a big deal.
80% of Heiskanen is better than 95% of the rest of the defensemen in the NHL.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right. So this next series with the Leafs and the Panthers, we've got executives getting suspended from social media. We've got Domi getting fined, which any Domi getting fined is it seems normal. And even though it's a 2-2 series,
we got Mac and Chuck at the end of Game 4 chirping the living daylights out of
you, Willie,
against Nylander, and then Berube said, "I love Berube's response. He's like, he doesn't listen to me. You think he's listening to Chuck?"
I say it like this: I do think Berube's been a little more reserved than usual, though, and I do feel like Florida is just full on wrestling heel now. And even though it's a 2-2 series, I feel like the Leafs are losing their grip on it a little bit. I don't know what you feel.
I don't know if I'm there yet. I'm not. I know Mike's obviously going to go the fatalist route.
Yeah, you might as well. You're the voice of reason.
I'm going to be I feel like I will. It's one of those things where I expected Florida as the defending champs to get off the mat and get off the mat swinging. Mike is right in that this is, the history of the Shanahan era Leafs is what it is. And it is up to them to rewrite that. And Game 5, I think, is at home. It's one of the things you want, at least having home ice in this case. I think home ice is a legitimate thing for Toronto in this playoff. I genuinely do. And I know that some might debate that, but I feel like one of the things about Berube is that he is a calming influence. I know you're saying, that he's being conservative. I look at him, he's looking at this team and trying to keep them sort of even keel here. Like, okay, you knew who you were playing. You knew this series was not going to be a walk.
Yeah, he didn't want to contribute to it by stepping it up even more in the media or with the media.
Yeah, and he's not gonna do that. Him and Maurice. Maybe if we get,
he could at some point.
It could, but again, we're at 5, 6, and potentially 7 here.
Yeah.
As the tension gets even higher and higher and higher in this series,
it'll be like a Lindy Ruff, Ken Hitchcock situation. I remember that series well.
Yeah,
they got into
it could, but we haven't got.
Or Lindy Ruff and Brian Murray going at each other, and but I mean, let's just say this: I don't know if home ice. They've been very good on home ice so far this year. I believe it's 4-1. But that one, when Ottawa got up, that building tightened up like a drum. And in a game where I don't know if if you lose this game, you're gonna get back to Toronto for Game 7.
No, it's tough. If you lose, I agree with you. This is a fulcrum game for them.
It is.
This is a fulcrum game. This is one that they have to play like. To me, they have to play like this is win or go home at this point. These are the championship rounds. And
Berube's playing his cards close to the vest, and he's like, we may make some lineup changes. It could be, Nick Robertson, and it could be David Kampf. And I seriously doubt it's going to come down to one of those guys. This is what I wrote on Hockey Hot Stove. This is going to come down to your 2 best players who have scored 2 goals each in 10 games in the playoffs. Now they've got tons of points, but 2 goals. You're being outscored or you're being equaled by Morgan Riley. He's got 4 goals. Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews had 2. I know Matthews is hurt. I know Marner is a peripheral player who does not go into the dirty areas. I don't care. Leaf fans don't care. You've got to step up and show the best effort that you have in your career in this instance, or you're going to reap the whirlwind. I think Mitch Marner is playing, I don't think Mitch Marner is coming back anyway, but that doesn't really matter.
Playing for a supper.
If he wants to, right. Joe, you want to make 11, 12, 13, $14 million?
This is where
show up.
He's going to make it anyhow, but I get your point.
He will, but at the same time, you want to have a little more cachet and reputation.
You'd like to. There's no doubt. He's been disappointing, and we think Matthews is hurt. So, I get it. But Matthews does still, I mean, I get he does a lot of other things, but he does still need to be more of a force offensively because that team just needs him to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to expect this much out of Matthew Nyes, and he's been great. But at some point,
Austin Matthews has to put on his cape.
Yeah. I mean, that's really it. And Joseph Wall played great last game. Wasn't his fault. If they get a game like that out of him again, you got to win it.
Yeah, I think at this point also Wall. I mean, I know things are still. I know Stolarz got back in, a little bit for practice, but I think this series is. I think they stick with Wall for the rest.
They're going to stay with Wall. I think that's the right move.
I think, and then they'll make a decision going into the next round. But here's the old story: is if they do win this series, I think Wall is the one they're going to ride with.
Yeah, it seems
the
that
rest of the way. I do. So, Mike, you're going to get your wish in that regard.
You will. That's it. That's it for Off the Post. We'll catch everybody next time.
Take care, everybody.